Well, God bless you. Thank you so very much for joining me this morning on the set of on the set of Kingdom Voice. And I certainly do appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your walk of faith to join me and to be a part of the broadcast here on this morning. And as we share truths of the kingdom from an apostolic perspective, I absolutely appreciate you showing confidence in what we're doing here to give us your time. And I certainly take that very seriously and take that very appreciatively. So thank you so very much for being a part of the broadcast and sharing with us during these times as we share one with another. I want to take a few minutes as people are joining and coming into the broadcast. I want to encourage you to reach out to us and say a special thank you to those of you that do and have. And so I want to take a few minutes to just express my appreciation. Many of you have reached out to us and connected with us and really began to dialogue with us apart from the broadcast. And I want to ask that that continue. It means a lot to me. It means a lot um, to have you just connect beyond my monologue and us having a bit of dialogue here through chats and what have you here at the during the broadcast because we can go deeper. We can explore some of the deeper things that that you're addressing and dealing with in your walk, and I'm doing in my walk, and it can become even more intimate than what it is here. And so, thank you so very much for doing that. And I want to invite all of you that have not subscribed to the YouTube channel. If you haven't already done so, please go over to our YouTube channel and subscribe there. That would mean a lot to us. And those of you watching by YouTube, if you haven't already done so, subscribe, like this broadcast, share it on your various media outlet platforms, and that would mean a lot to us and allow us to reach more people. For those of you that would like to reach us, you can do so at our at a multitude of places. You can do it by email at lcbellany@yahoo.com. That's my personal email address. I get those, I read those, I respond to those, and I would like to see more of those. And so please feel free to reach out to us there. You can do so on the Spotify platform at Kingdom Talk. Just download the app, Kingdom Talk. Download the app Spotify, and you can reach us there as well. I also want to invite you to share your thoughts and your comments as as we share here on the broadcast. I want you to share your thoughts and your comments because it's important as we dialogue and as we talk one with another to share that so that we can address any questions or comments or disagreements that you may have. And I would certainly appreciate you doing that as well. Okay, so with that being said, I want to engage today with a from the subject or from the thought diversity, affirmative action, diversity, and DEI. If you've listened to any amount of current events of late, especially with the change of the administration that we've gone through with the Biden administration leaving office and the Trump administration coming into office, I'm sure you have heard or you have encountered the DEI conversation. And I've had a lot of conversation with professional colleagues, with personal colleagues about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I can tell you that the issue of DEI has varying opinions surrounding it. Some people are for it. Some people are agnostic about it. They can care less. Others are against it. And it is as probably a divisive a subject as anything else in this country at this moment in time. And so over the past couple of weeks, months, since all of this has really started to come to a head in the public sphere, I've had a number of conversations with people. I've had a number of opportunities to discuss this issue. And today I wanted to take the time to give my hopefully clarity around affirmative action, diversity, and DEI, and to help us develop a clear understanding of what these issues are, the similarities or the commonalities between these issues, and then also the public perception of these issues, so that you can begin to understand the argument or the discussion from perhaps a different perspective than one that you have shared or one that you hold. So it's important for us to really allow ourselves the opportunity to hear a divergent opinion or a divergent perspective from the one that we currently hold around affirmative action, diversity, and DEI. So, with that being said, let's take a look at this issue of inclusiveness, diversity, equity within the American landscape of education, employment, politics, and see if there is some information that we can share or you can share with the rest of the listening audience around this issue. So let's start with where it all began, the civil rights movement. Okay, let's start with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In 1963, John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and in the midst of 1960 of that process, the Civil Rights Act was being championed by Dr. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. Now, we know Dr. King to be the lightning rod, the spearhead, the tip of the spear of the civil rights movement, but there were many others that were involved and instrumental in bringing about the landmark legislation that is commonly known as the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Within that Civil Rights Act was the legislation that allowed for a prohibition against discrimination. So let's take a look at this coming from the National Archive Foundation, and it says this: the Civil Rights Act, signed into law by President Lyndon Johnson on July 2nd, 1964, prohibited discrimination in public places, provided for the integration of schools and other public facilities, and made employment discrimination illegal. In 1964, I was 3 years old when that happened. This document was the most sweeping civil rights legislation since Reconstruction. In a nationally televised address on June 6, 1963, President John F. Kennedy urged the nation to take action toward guaranteeing equal treatment of every American, regardless of race. Soon after Kennedy proposed that, Congress considered civil rights legislation that would address voting rights, public accommodations, school desegregation, non-discrimination in federally assisted programs, and more. Despite Kennedy's assassination in November of 1963, his proposal culminated in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, signed into law by President Lyndon Johnson just a few hours after the House approval. The act outlawed segregation in business, such as theater, restaurants, and hotels. It banned discriminatory practices in employment and ended segregation in public places such as swimming pools, libraries, and public schools. Now, I wanted to read that because what many people understand as the affirmative action approach or affirmative action came from and was birthed out of the civil rights movement and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So affirmative action basically addresses the affirmation, the affirmative act of ensuring that individuals, particularly minorities, are not discriminated against in the public sphere. Affirmative action, the effort, the intent, the affirmation of ensuring that people of color, women, minorities are not discriminated against in the public sphere, and is an approach or is an effort that is absolutely necessary. And I'm going to explain why I believe that to be so. When you look at the organic practices in this country, when I say organic, I mean those that have just risen to the surface out of natural evolution of business, education, society, finances, banking, all of those things. The organic structure still holds that the decision makers within that infrastructure, within that structure, are predominantly Caucasian and predominantly male Caucasians. And those people are the ones that are predominantly making the decisions of inclusion, making the decisions of diversity. Okay? And what the affirmative action or the affirmative effort does is that it puts forth affirmation that we want to ensure that we are allowing people that don't look like those that are making the decisions the opportunity to participate. Why is that important? Why is that psychological issue of such importance? I'll tell you why. The default position, listen to me closely, the default position of society, of humanity, is discrimination. Not, and I don't say that in a bad way. We all discriminate. We discriminate with the food that we eat. We discriminate with the places that we go. We discriminate with the people that we associate with. Not all based on race, but we discriminate based on a variety of other issues and a variety of other considerations and concerns. And as we discriminate, we simply say, I choose this over that. One of the things that I often encourage people to do as I encourage them to expand their horizons is that I encourage them to do something out of their natural comfort. I encourage them to do things that are out of their natural comfort, which is to deny their normal discriminations and engage in something that they would not normally do. And what does that do? That is an affirmative effort on their part to include themselves in other things and also include other things into their normal activities. Why am I going down this path? Because the normal, natural human response in these situations of hiring, selection, finance, education, the normal, natural tendency and propensity of people is to discriminate, to choose people that look like them, that they perceive comes from a place that they come from, that people share common interests and values. That's not to say that people that don't share those things, don't come from where they come, don't look like they look, are bad. It's just a natural human condition. It is a byproduct of the human psyche and the human condition. And thus we discriminate. Now the problem comes in is that when that discrimination is boiled down to race, and that racial discrimination comes from a place of biases, and that are subconscious or unconscious biases, and that are based on false information and false that produces harmful biases, racial biases, and that comes from a place of where those biases are predicated on wrong information and bad information. That's when the discrimination takes a dark turn. And I want to say to many people, to many of us that are watching, that many times, especially those of us that are of the minority, African Americans, females, foreigners, are of the minority in many instances, that discrimination turns to a place of race, and that place of race is birthed out of a place of ignorance about a certain race. And so now I don't want you here with me because of my biases and my ignorant biases about the people that I perceive you to come from, the places that I perceive you to come from. I don't want you here on that basis. That has nothing to do with the character of the person. It has nothing to do with the capability of the person, the expertise of that person. It is purely based on a racial bias that comes from a dark place. And therein lies the problem that many people face when we look at and when we have to deal with discrimination in a variety of places, whether it's housing or banking, or whether it is education or government or employment, when that discrimination comes from a dark place. And that's the problem that we have and often run into when we start talking about affirmative action, diversity, or DEI. When we look at the need for affirmative action, and I want to take a few minutes, I'm not going to take up too much of your time, but I want to take a few minutes and talk about affirmative action. Affirmative action is the intentional effort, the intentional intent to bring on and to include others that come from that different place. That's not to say that those people or those individuals aren't qualified. Those individuals aren't able, and that they aren't bearing the expertise or the desirable things that we're looking for. Many and most do. Okay? But the effort here is to intentionally, that's what affirmative means. It means to affirm. It means to intentionally do something. Okay? It allows someone to take an intentional step toward bringing, including someone, and ensuring that the playing field is level for everybody that's engaging in that effort. I am of the persuasion. I am of the persuasion that affirmative action is a necessary approach, and it is necessary and will always be necessary because of what we know as the human condition. We, by default, are discriminating individuals. We are a discriminating species. We discriminate about a variety of things. And it stands to reason that we would discriminate in some key issues: housing, banking, employment, education. We discriminate. We do. The issue is to harness or to check that discrimination and to hold it in check so that we are not unduly denying opportunities to individuals that, by all other measures, deserve that opportunity. So I believe that affirmative action in hiring is necessary, in education is necessary, in banking is necessary, in society is necessary. I think affirmative action is a necessary approach. Now, what I don't think is necessary and should be avoided is tokenism. Including someone in a critical effort purely because they met some type of identity check. Any inclusion of an individual to a group, whether that's a banking issue or education or a political or an employment issue, any individual that is intentionally being pursued should, at the very minimum, bear the qualifications to join that group. If it's banking, that your credit scores and your business acumen and your employment history all bear the minimum requirements to be allowed to participate in whatever it is that you are endeavoring to participate in. The problem that often raises its head is that the people, in an effort to overcompensate, ignore those basic requirements and qualifications and bring on an individual or bring on someone that doesn't meet the qualifications, and thus you get into tokenism. I disagree with that. 100% disagree with tokenism. Because tokenism makes it more difficult for the next individual that is coming about to be able to get that opportunity. It is vitally important that we understand that affirmative action, as we have known it to be, should be something that we all pursue, even in your own personal lives. Many of us who are African American or Caucasian or Asian or Hispanic or, whichever identity group that we belong to, we should effort to diversify our relationships, because that doesn't come natural. And if you say it does, I think you're being disingenuous with yourself. There is no such thing as a colorblind society. I think there are instances where a society doesn't value color as much as we do here in America. Or should I say emphasize color as we do here in America, in North America in particular, the United States of America. And I think in large part that is due to the racial tensions that were here from the very founding and establishment of this nation. And so we see color. I'll never forget this. I had a very interesting conversation with a friend of mine from Venezuela. And the conversation was about race. And he made a comment to me that I just didn't understand that comment at the time that he made it because of my biases and because I was brought up in this culture of the United States of America, with all of its racial tensions, with all of its segregation, with all of its discrimination, with its intentional exclusion of African Americans, of Negroes, of Black people in this country. Okay? And he made this statement to me that as growing up in Venezuela, there were Black, dark-skinned Venezuelans, there were Caucasian-looking Venezuelans, and his comment to me was, we don't emphasize color the way you do here in America. I did not see color the way you see color in America until I got here. Meaning that back in Venezuela, people were not judged as severely for the color of their skin as we are judged here in America on that same basis. I found that very interesting, which said to me from a lot of perspectives, it becomes a matter of racial discrimination on the part of the individual. And that individual representing an organization, again, whether it's banking, education, whether it's government, whether it's educational, that individual imposes their own biases onto the process of that institution, of that organization. And that's where affirmative action, and why I believe affirmative action has to be maintained in this country. I'll say this and I'll move on. Affirmative action is a necessary thing and approach because the overwhelming, I don't know if that number is 70 or 80% of the people making hiring inclusion decisions are Caucasians, and in particular, Caucasian males. Okay? Males might not make up 80%, but Caucasians, I believe, do. And if we as a country are not careful, we will continue to perpetuate damaging practices. Now, let me address that for just a second. I need us to understand, especially those of a kingdom mindset. I need us to understand that we're in a different season. We're in a different time now. What worked in terms of racial engagements back then, and I'm primarily speaking to my Caucasian brothers and sisters and my Caucasian friends, what worked back then and you got away with it and it was acceptable and it led to otherwise positive outcomes is not going to be the case moving forward. Those same discriminatory, those same biased behaviors that you were able to do and get away with, I'm not talking about from a standpoint of legality. I'm talking about from a standpoint of outcome. What you were able to do and get away with because you got a positive outcome in terms of your intent and in terms of all of that is not going to be the same in this season and moving forward. The penalties, again, I'm not talking legal penalties, the penalties socially, economically, public relationship wise, the penalties for ignoring a qualified minority or a qualified individual based on some identity, whether it's my female or African American or Asian American or Hispanic American, whatever the case may be. The penalty for ignoring a qualified individual because they fell into one of those identity groups is going to be far stiffer moving forward than it is, or rather than it has been. That's a word from the kingdom. That's a word from Elohim. That's a word from the Creator. Because the shift in this season is shifting all aspects and requiring a different response from every aspect in the kingdom itself. Discrimination, especially on the basis of race and sex or gender, economics, discrimination purely based on those bases will yield far stiffer, undesirable outcomes than that which we have seen in the days gone by. Okay, affirmative action. Let's talk about diversity for a second. Why is diversity important? So first of all, after affirmative action in the 1964 came about, companies, organizations, the Fords and the Boeings and the Shells of the world, these Fortune 500 organizations, began to recognize the value of diversity, bringing people from different backgrounds and different perspectives and different experiences into the fold. Why? Because they began to recognize that their product, their businesses, their organizations, their societies, whether it's a corporate society or a governmental agency, were better off because they had this diverse workforce that was coming and contributing to a better outcome of their enterprise, whether it's a business or government or banking institution. They recognized that it was so much better allowing different perspectives and individuals into the organization. And diversity began to take on a more robust presence within society. And diversity is a good thing. And I think everyone eventually began to see the value of diversity. Certainly there were detractors, and certainly there were individuals that did not want it, didn't like it because a black man was sitting at the same table as a group of white men, or a black woman, or a woman period was sitting at the table at the old boys club. I get that. I understand that. There are people that didn't like it and don't like it now. But the overwhelming, the overarching, the overwhelming perception and reception of diversity has and still is extremely positive. And we have pioneers like the Tuskegee Airmen that led the way. The Dr. Kings of the world led the way. The Tiger Woods of the world led the way. The Charlie Siffers of the world, and many of you don't know that preceded Tiger Woods, led the way and broke barriers and made it more entertaining in the entertainment world. The Sidney Poitiers of the world, the Ella Fitzgeralds of the world. They led that way. They brought a level of engagement and participation that allowed the rest of the world to say, you know what? I like this. This is good. And diversity began to be, and still is, and should always be, an affirmative effort on the part of all of us to diversify our experiences. So diversity began to take a very positive, very progressive position across multiple spectrums within society, and even to this day is overwhelmingly positively spoken of. Because diversity delivered the goods. Diversity was executed on the basis of, if I need to hire someone that doesn't look like us, they are going to be experienced and capable first, but they are definitely going to be not like us. I don't see any issue with that whatsoever. I see that as overwhelmingly positive. If a black organization needs to hire someone that doesn't look like them, then they have to affirmatively go after someone that is Caucasian, European, Hispanic. They have to go after them. I'm talking about in America now, in the United States of America. And I think that is a positive thing. Why? Because you avoid this phenomenon that we call groupthink or culture think. I said this last week. Everyone doesn't share your worldview. Not everyone shares your worldview. Not everyone shares your worldview. And as a result, if I am going to get an inclusive worldview, a worldview that absolutely allows me to understand more about the world so that I can make my own choices and decisions about my perception of the world, then I need to be inclusive. I need to share diverse experiences. And the only way I can share those diverse experiences is that I need to engage with people and experiences that are different than the ones that I currently share and currently have. And that's important. That's vital for us. So diversity is something that we need to absolutely continue to pursue. I believe affirmative action on the basis, and diversity is an outplay of affirmative action. Diversity is just the approach that the name of the approach that we've given it to say that I am going to ensure that my organization, my company is diversely represented by the people that we deal with, diversely represented by our customer base, or whatever the case may be. And so it is absolutely important that we continue to engage and pursue diversity as a matter of approach. So first there was affirmative action that came out of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We began to call it affirmative action, the affirmative effort to not discriminate. Then came along diversity, where diversity began to encourage and be embraced and adopted by the corporate structure of this nation. And it received overwhelming, and to this very day, overwhelming reception. And now we move into DEI. And I find it very interesting that DEI, even with affirmative action in place and diversity in place, they came along with diversity, equity, and inclusion. I want to read something to you that about DEI that I think it would be good to hear. I pulled some information together on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I want to read that and read some excerpts from it. And then we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about, take some of your thoughts and your questions. And by the way, feel free, please share your thoughts and your questions. Let's have a dialogue, as always, about DEI and diversity and affirmative action and those things that are really presenting themselves in our culture today. So I want to read first of all the intent of DEI. The primary goal of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the DEI initiatives. Number one, to enhance reputation, ensure that diverse voices and ideas are included in workplaces, education, and social environments. Promotes fairness, address historical and systemic inequities by providing equal opportunities for all individuals. And I highlighted that in yellow because I'm going to come back and talk about that and give some thought to that here in just a minute. Improve outcomes. Leverage diverse teams to foster better decision-making, creativity, and overall performance. Improved outcomes. Diversity delivers improved outcomes. Diversity delivers and promotes improved outcomes. Why? Because I have a diverse group of voices objecting and agreeing with one another, shooting down ideas that are flawed, promoting ideas that the stronger ideas, and those are the ones that come to the surface. And then lastly, create inclusive cultures. Build environments where all members feel valued and respected. Now, I don't see anything outside of what I highlighted in yellow that is a problem. These things are laudable. We should be approaching those things. Okay? Let's look at the public perception of DEI. Supportive viewpoints say this: many see DEI as essential for social justice, fairness, and better organizational performance. A majority of U.S. workers believe focusing on DEI at work is a beneficial thing. That's the viewpoint of those that support DEI. The skeptical viewpoints say this: some view DEI as potentially divisive leading to tokenism. You heard me talk about that earlier. Reverse discrimination or unnecessary costs. There are concerns that DEI efforts may disadvantage individuals who do not meet DEI criteria. Okay? So you have the intent of DEI, and then you have the public perception. Now I want to focus, let's look at political and demographic divides. Opinions on DEI vary significantly along political and demographic lines. For example, a higher percentage of a certain political party support DEI initiatives as compared to the other political party. Okay? And they divide, that's a pretty strong divide between DEI of one party versus the perception of DEI of the other party. Which says, for the most part, that the perception and opinion of DEI is divided pretty much in this country. I'd like to explore a little bit as to my opinion as to why DEI is such a divisive discussion and issue. Why diversity, equity, and inclusion is such a divisive issue. If you take each one of those terms, diversity, equity, inclusion, by themselves, I think we will all agree that those are laudable ideals and an approach to success. Diversity, you want to be inclusive with people, and you want to be equitable with people. Where I think, and I'll go back here, where I think the issue came and ran into challenges is what I have highlighted on your screen in yellow. Address historical and systemic inequities by providing equal opportunity for all individuals. And the reason I highlight that in yellow is because I believe this is where DEI began to be so divisive. In an effort to address historical and systemic inequities, we promoted an inequity against a certain group within our country. And when that began to happen, like anything, anyone that is facing discrimination, whether it is reverse discrimination or intentional discrimination, they are going to fight back. Juxtapose that with diversity. No one had a problem with diversity because diversity did not promote reverse discrimination. Whereas the perception is that DEI intentionally reverse discriminates. And what happened was that intentional perception of reverse discrimination provoked a resistance against the people who began to be discriminated against. And so DEI, rather than being a positive thing, began to be a contentious thing. Couple that with documented issues around unqualified people being given that role because of some identity check, promoted even more public backlash. So now we're at the point in this DEI discussion, that half of the population is against it, half of the population is for it, and so any issue that is divided like that will always be contentious. Now we're having corporation after corporation after corporation. Now the government has decided to abandon their DEI initiatives. Here is my concern. My concern is in abandoning the DEI initiative, you abandon diversity, you abandon inclusion, you abandon equity, and none of those things should be done. DEI has become a pariah in society, and I get that. And I'll give you an example. Recently, in an effort by the new Secretary of Defense to rid the defense of its DEI initiatives, the defense secretary, and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here, the defense secretary inadvertently excluded the contributions of people of color and women on the basis that those contributions came as a matter of DEI. No, that wasn't the case. And thankfully, that was reversed. But the initial effort was that they were going to get rid of the contributions of the Tuskegee Airmen because they were black, and that's DEI, or the issues of the calculators in NASA because they were black, and that's DEI. No, that wasn't an issue. They were black, and they were productive, and they were qualified, and they did a job that was instrumental to the success of the military and to the success of NASA, irrespective of the fact that they were black and female or black and male. They contributed to the success. That's not DEI as DEI has come to be known. That was diversity. And diversity has always yielded a better result. And that's one of the examples that I find to be concerning to me, because my concern is, in an effort to address the ills of DEI or the perception of DEI, we will inadvertently backtrack over diversity, and backtrack over inclusion, and backtrack over equity. I know this is a challenging discussion this morning, but I absolutely want us to understand how important it is and how critical it is for us to understand the value of diversity, to distinguish DEI as it has come to be known from diversity, from affirmative action. And I'm going to close by saying this. For those of us and those of you that are listening that are champions of DEI, the road to making DEI what I believe it was originally intended to be is challenging. And quite frankly, I don't think that battle can be won at this point. Because the term itself has become such a pariah in business, in society, in politics, that I don't think that there is a salvage of DEI. I personally believe we need to lean into diversity. We need to lean into affirmative action. And if there's another movement that is birthed out of this new affirmative leaning and affirmative acknowledgement of diversity and affirmative action, if there's another movement that or phenomenon that results out of that, that's good. But trying to resurrect DEI, I think, is a losing effort. I think there is DEI, again, as it is perceived to be by a huge, what I think is a majority of Americans, is a losing battle. But I think we ought to lean into affirmative action, lean into diversity, because if not, if we don't continue to lean into those things, if we just simply pout and boo-hoo cry and whine about DEI and the lack of credibility it has fallen victim to, if we just simply boo-hoo whine and cry about that, then we are going to miss a golden opportunity. We're going to lose the gains of diversity and of affirmative action. And I don't think anybody wants that. We cannot do that. I want to say this, and I'll close with this. And by the way, please feel free to share your questions and your comments. I can see them live as they come in. I want to say and just emphasize on the issue of diversity, or rather on the issue of DEI. We have to really begin to understand that discrimination against anyone on the basis of some arbitrary identity issue is, well, let me qualify that. I'm not talking about anything immoral or insane or of that. I'm talking about normal social norms. Any discrimination against anyone on the basis of some identity, normal social identity, is going to yield undesirable results. May not happen in the immediate, but it will happen for sure. And anytime you discriminate against anyone, you ensure resistance. This is why, and I'll go back to what I said earlier, this is why I think diversity is such a powerful approach. Diversity didn't discriminate against anyone. It simply opened the doors to more people, to others. It didn't discriminate against white males or white females. It just ensured that a qualified minority was invited into the organization, into banking, into business. That's all it did. It didn't deny the majority to continue to compete and continue to present themselves as a qualified candidate. It just opened the door for minorities to compete with them. That's diversity. Whereas when we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, or rather DEI, let me not use the acronym or the terms that fit the acronym. DEI, that term has become synonymous with reverse discrimination against white males. You ensure yourself pushback, and that's what happened. And ultimately, that pushback prevailed. It prevailed. And I find that very, very interesting. Okay. Lastly, DEI, diversity, and affirmative action are mutually exclusive of each other at the finer details of this discussion. When you start to dissect each one of these issues, affirmative action, diversity, and DEI, when you start to dissect them, you begin to see the uniqueness of each one of them. And it's very interesting that diversity is overwhelmingly positive in the eyes of anyone that you talk to. Affirmative action has its detractors, but still very arguable in terms of its presence. Whereas DEI, it has gained an overwhelming resistance in the public sphere. And I think it's important for us to understand the differences and the uniqueness between them and form your opinion about what your thoughts are about those three issues. Amen. Amen. Well, listen, God bless you, beloved. Thank you so very much for taking a few minutes today to have this conversation with me about diversity, affirmative action, and DEI, and wanted to give a perspective on this issue. And let me say this before we close, and I'll wrap it up with this. I believe the kingdom of heaven deals with diversity. Okay. I think diversity is at the core, not DEI, but diversity is at the core of who we are as kingdom sons and daughters. From all walks of life, all spheres of life, we come to the kingdom. And that brings the representation of the creation to the kingdom. That's diversity. I don't discriminate against anyone. I don't hold anyone back. I just present myself. And this is why I believe the kingdom is a representation of diversity, not DEI. And the kingdom doesn't, or should I say in the affirmative, the kingdom welcomes everyone and intentionally welcomes everyone. And it doesn't stack the ground so that the person that is being welcomed has a greater chance at success than the people that are already there. No, the kingdom diversity levels the playing field so that everyone can succeed. This is why I believe the kingdom is such a tremendous representative of diversity. Amen. Well, God bless you, beloved. Thank you so very much. Join me again next week as we continue to bring you truths of the kingdom from an apostolic perspective. DE&I, affirmative action, and diversity. I hope we were able to share some light on that subject. Until next time, be well, be blessed, and we'll see you again next Sunday morning right here on Kingdom Voice broadcast at 10:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. See you then.